Hey,
Hello, how's it going?
good. How you doing, man?
I am doing all right.
Got the Hawaiian shirt on today.
I don't know if it's Hawaiian, it's just floral. Sporting the florals.
Nice, nice, nice.
You like it?
I love it, man.
Okay, good.
All right,
So
so
what do
what are
we
we
got
talking
today?
about today?
Ha I said it first. Okay, so we've got a good webinar today because this is something that it's really rounded out our security stack. So I'm excited that we've got the people from that company on to talk to you guys about it because it's really important. But first, let's get to the intro here. Jeff, who are we? Where are we from?
Yep, I'm Jeffrey Tavelli, the founder of RCS Professional Services. We are an IT managed service provider serving small and mid-sized businesses across the country. We have offices and presence in New York, Atlanta, California. So we're excited to be here. Cybersecurity is a huge deal. It's a lot to be aware of, a lot to protect, and there's all new threat actors and new things happening all the time. There's a lot to stay on top of. So we are excited to have one of our strategic partners. And yeah, it's a lot to learn, a lot to keep up with, like I said. And there's all new developments, especially with all this AI stuff. I think we're going to touch on all that, but we're excited to bring the experts to the table to help us understand more about what to protect ourselves from, right?
Yes, indeed, because I don't know, there are hacks every day. Like, yeah, at this point, I'm maybe a little immune to every hack I see come across every news station. It's unbelievable. How about that one last month with the port of Seattle? Let me tell
Yeah.
you, it was probably not an awesome day to be carrying baggage through Seattle Airport because those they couldn't even register baggage. It's crazy.
I also heard one yesterday about, I guess, some sort of water company in New Jersey that's just out of commission. Hopefully they got it back up and running, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's serious stuff.
a
What's
company like
that?
that, that happens to them. They could go out of business from one hack. They could theoretically go out of business, which is crazy.
Yeah. And then there's also on the small business side, which we deal with a lot, that's not in the newspapers and just, left and right, all sorts of threats and these bad guys, they're hurting companies, and it's important to protect yourself. So I guess we'll get into some of that, right?
Yeah. So for years we've had our suggested security stack, and it had a lot of preventative measures, right? You didn't want to get a virus. You wanted to prevent someone from clicking on a phishing email from getting through. You wanted to prevent someone from clicking on that phishing email. A lot of preventative measures. But what happens if that breaks down? And what happens if a hacker does get in? What happens? Someone loses their credentials, it gets stolen, and now a hacker's got those credentials. Now what? Now, all that preventative stuff, I don't know how much it's going to do for you. And this is what these guys at Blackpoint really did for our security stack. It really rounded out our security stack. And what I'm talking about is Blackpoint Cyber. And these guys it's awesome what they do. And I would go into it, but you know what? We've got one of their guys here to show you what's going on. And so without further ado, let me bring on Brandon Dobrec. Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Norman, thanks so much. Thanks, Jeffrey, for letting me hop on today. How you gentlemen doing?
Doing great. Doing great. Excited that you're here.
Yeah, likewise. Can't wait to dig into it, talk about a little security today. I think there's going to be some interesting things folks might learn about what's going on around the market, what's going on in the threat landscape, and I think we might even get a little bit into AI.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you guys out there. Put your questions in the chat. You're on LinkedIn Live. There's a little chat thing. Put your question in the chat. We'll be able to see him, and we'll be able to answer him. So throw them in there.
What about if someone wants to get on and ask a question live? How do they do that?
Yeah, we could definitely do that. Alex, person in the background who's actually making all this happen, she is going to post a link into the chat. If you click on that link, you too can be on the show. And if you do that, just turn down the volume on something or other. How's that for strong instruction?
It's a good call. I've made that mistake before.
Because what'll happen is if you have the volume turned up, it'll just reverberate right back in. You'll hear all kinds of echo. It'll be a nightmare. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Brandon, what do we got?
Absolutely. And I guess quickly before I jump into it all, I figure some intros are in order.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me join you all today. I am Brandon Dobrec. I head up product management here at Blackpoint Cyber. Came by way of a number of other large security companies within the network space, the endpoint space, and actually ultimately started my career serving the government and the intelligence community. So I've been doing security for a minute now, and look forward to jumping into it with everybody.
Okay, awesome.
So before we get into anything else, right, quick sort of high level agenda, and I know we're going to see where things take us and have a great conversation here today, but want to get through some common definitions with people. You know, I know the more I talk to small, mid-sized businesses, the more I sort of learn there's all these terms getting passed around out there, right? And there's sort of a new term du jour every day. And we get exposed to it from our cyber insurance questionnaires, from our partners, from the various things that pop up on these articles. But it's really important that we establish sort of a common framework of language, because we love our jargon in cybersecurity, and it can get really confusing and overwhelming very quickly. So I just kind of wanted to talk through what some of those words are, where we see them, why we see them. So first and foremost, I was just going to talk about EDR. One thing I asked all the time as an MDR provider is what's MDR, what's EDR, what's the difference between the two?
Well, we went through this one. We went through this one here at RCS. We didn't even know what EDR and MDR was at one point. Early on, we were like, EDR, what?
And then they added XDR to it just to confuse it. Right?
Just the kicks.
There's just I was going to get into that one later, which is where is it all going? But EDR is endpoint detection and response. So if we think back to where security came from, at least on our devices, right, on our endpoints. And when we say endpoints, we mean your laptop, your desktop, your phone, your server, your things like that. It started with antivirus, right? When I was younger, right, there was sort of McAfee or something like that on every machine. But just like we develop and we get better, so do the bad guys. And they started not doing those, what's known as signature-based, which is sort of the known bad things that we were very good at catching. So a couple of providers came out and were like, we're going to create a next generation version of protection for the endpoint, go farther than what these antiviruses did. And that was the birth of EDR. And it was focused on how can we catch malware? How can we catch sort of these unusual behaviors that we're getting by the legacy tools? So it's one of the first things that you'll sort of hear about when people start dipping their toe into security is do you have an EDR provider? Who is your EDR provider? It's a really common question for insurance questionnaires, for compliance frameworks and things like that, because it's something that security does tend to pin to.
That's right. All you people sending us cyber insurance questionnaires, it's on there every time at this point.
Which we did
do have an EDR.
So the second piece, and it's another one that comes up so much because of that, is the SIM. SIM or SIEM, people use them interchangeably. I've always been partial to SIM. Norman, I think you're a SIEM guy.
SIEM, I mean, it's SIEM.
I got you.
SIEM.
I vehemently use GIF because graphic user interface should be a good. So like, I should do SIEM
all the way.
But yeah. So a SIEM is really a security information and events management tool. It's where we aggregate the logs. So all of our tools, everything in our environment, all of our endpoints and our servers and our identity tools, et cetera, output logs. And a log is just a record of an event that has occurred. Large portions of security are pretty heavily dependent on these logs because essentially we dump all the logs in, then we do what's called post-processing, which is analysis of the data, and we look for patterns, and we look for unusual behaviors, and we look for signs of something malicious happening, something bad. So that's where SIEMs came into the security space. Oftentimes they serve as your system of record. Oftentimes they are a critical component of compliance, because when that questioner comes in and says, hey, you said you're storing this thing, prove it. The SIEM is ultimately where you go back to in order to show the evidence to them. And it remains as a key part of security. From a personal bias standpoint, not necessarily the best security tool. Unfortunately, they can tend to be a little bit slow and unwieldy, and just the nature of storing logs can make them expensive. But it's one that you will very oftentimes hear when security terms and language are thrown around.
I can't think of anything more boring sounding than storing logs.
It gets even worse because, right, you look at like just storing logs, managing logs, an inherently boring thing. And then you look at like what Gartner talks about, and Gartner is a lovely large analyst firm who goes and rates and ranks everything. And they're going, well, everybody is unhappy with them. So not only is it boring to do, but it's very expensive. They say it takes 2 to 3 people just to set up the data pipeline. And the quality of what you get out of them is typically fairly low, right? There's a lower than 50% satisfaction rate amongst the 5 main reasons that people buy a SIEM. So
yeah,
both boring and frustrating.
All right, what else you got for us?
All right, so I got 3 more I kind of want to talk about here, right? Malware. Malware is just everywhere. We talk about it constantly. We talk about it in context of EDR. We talk about it in context of all of these attacks, because it is a favored, what's known as a TTP, or a tactic, technique, and procedure. Basically just the behaviors that bad guys take. They love to get into the environment, and then they love to deploy malware because it's persistent. It lets them stay there. And usually it lets them take particular behaviors that get to the big bang, whether that's data exfiltration, whether that's ransomware, whether that's, just sheer destruction, right? Like the Mirai attack that we saw back in the late 2010s, where the only goal out of the attack was disabling infrastructure.
right.
So malware is another one I wanted to touch on. BEC, or business email compromise, is one I wanted to touch on because it is arguably the most important for small business. The next one I'm going to talk about is actually the most important, but BEC is right up there, right?
Yeah,
And the reason
is one we see quite often for companies that don't set things up the right way, right?
and that's exactly it, Jeffrey, right? Like almost, or more than half of all attacks against small businesses are actually business email compromises. And they exist on sort of 2 tiers. One, when you compromise the email, either through a vishing or a spear phishing or some form of staged attack, you can trick people. You can get their credentials. You can have them wire money, right? That's a real world example that we saw where somebody claimed to be the CFO of somebody that they had a deal going on with. And they had all of the right information.
Yep.
And they were able to send an email that convinced them to route money into a dedicated fund that was the bad guys' fund, that wasn't the fund of the company that we're trying to do business with, right? So business email compromises are real, and they're relevant, and they're everywhere. Actually, sorry, go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I was going to say quite damaging usually once the compromise happens.
Yeah, it's we'll talk a little bit about the small business landscape coming up, but there's 2 numbers that I kind of like to call out there. In RSOC, right, and the people who Blackpoint is helping, 25% of the companies that we onboard, like customers of partners like yourself, actually have some form of BEC live in their environment. Typically they haven't reached the big bang, right? They're in the middle of a multi-stage attack.
Right.
But we find evidence that M365 has been compromised, that some email instance has been compromised, that some multi-stage attack is going down.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. Oh, Norman, you're muted. I don't
Norman, you're muted. Or he dropped his mic. You could keep going. What else you got on terms?
So last term I want to talk about is MFA, right? MFA is multi-factor authentication, and it is the root of so much security. Multi-factor authentication is just this idea of adding an additional check on any login, right? So we see this with our Google or our Comcast or our, anything in your real life or your normal life. You go to log in and authenticate, and maybe you get a text to your phone, maybe you get an email, maybe you have an authenticator code or things like that. But it's just adding that secondary check that says, is this really you? What's funny is like this little thing actually massively reduces your likelihood of being compromised. And the vast majority of breaches that we see come down to MFAs that weren't in place, right? I know, Norman, you and I were talking about the Access Health attack that happened the other day, right? Rooted in systems that didn't have MFA in place. The Change Healthcare attack that was everywhere, right? It was all over the news. A critical system did not have MFA implemented. They took credentials, they logged in like they were a real person. There was no secondary check, and then had access to, the keys of the kingdom.
Yep. It's a big one.
Mm-hmm. So, but really, those are the big ones I wanted to touch on. Those were the big ones I wanted to establish. Moving off of there, right, thought we could talk through what the cybersecurity landscape looks like, right? Why do people come to MSPs like yourself? Why do people come to folks like myself needing cybersecurity? That's just a cost, right? No, it's so critical. It's so important right now because all the evidence is that it is rising and that it is truly a business level problem. It's not just a technical problem. We talked a bit before about the impacts to businesses, about the impacts to small to medium, like SMBs and things like that. Verizon, in their latest, what they call DBIR, which is the database incident response report, they actually called out the fact that of SMBs who get hit, right, and get to the big bang, 60% of them go out of business within 6 months. And that would be less scary if it, constantly I hear, but it's not me, right? People aren't attacking me. People aren't coming after me. Well, the numbers say that that's not true. Half of all attacks now are targeting small to mid-sized businesses.
Right.
We used to have this trend that we called targeted campaigns, right? A targeted campaign was some bad guy threat actor, some nation state, some country, some hacktivist group would go very specifically target the Fortune 500. And they would say, I'm going hard after them continuously. Still exists, right? We still see that. We saw it with the MGM attack. But far more, we're seeing targets of convenience. We hear about ransomware all the time, right? Ransomware is in the news. It used to be that you had to be highly skilled to do ransomware. You had to be able to do social engineering. You had to be able to write the software. You had to be able to get into the environments without getting caught. You had to be able to deploy them. But in today's day and age, there's actually ransomware as a service, right? Just like we can go out and buy SaaS tools, over the counter, these bad guy groups can buy SaaS tools as well, and they can buy them at a fairly low cost. So, there's this term we use, script kiddies, right? Script kiddies are more junior hackers who don't necessarily have the most technical skills. Well, now they can start leveraging these tools for a low startup price and start immediately making money and going after these things.
That's crazy. It's
right.
So easy.
So
to be a hacker at this point.
Yeah, basically, what we're noticing is, like you mentioned, used to be go after the Fortune 500. What do they care about me? And then it was oh, they do care about you because you're the easiest guys to pick on because you're insecure. Granted, we're catching up a little bit with all these great products like EDR, MDR, but there's a whole supply chain and an industry. It's not just somebody that decided to find someone that was the easy target. But there's all sorts of supply chains and things going on in the background where they could do this at scale 24/7 across every single state and country in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny actually, because as much as we're benefiting from improvements in AI, right, and the advent of AI, so were they. So to my comment about ransomware deployed as a service, well, reconnaissance as a service, initial compromise as a service, all of these things, right? The whole process of identification of risk, of validating targets, of getting to initial payload and things like that. there's all kinds of automation driving that now, where you don't even need somebody hands on keyboard finding the target. It's like we're business, bad guys are business too, right? We have BDRs out calling leads, finding leads and everything. It feeds into our CRM. So do the bad guys. They have these automations that are identifying leads that says, hey, we need to go target these and we need to go after them.
Right. I mean, yeah, the way we see it, if companies aren't investing in protective measures, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of how we see it, right? Is there's the two pieces. There's the insufficient cyber protections, right? Cyber attacks themselves are more dangerous. They're more complex. They're doing more and different things than they used to. And a lot of companies just don't know what good looks like when it comes to cybersecurity. They don't know what their stack looks like. They don't look at it holistically from prevention to detection, response to post-compromise. And most businesses nowadays, right, we've gone through a massive technological overhaul. IT is no longer sort of a nice to have, it's business critical. If your backend servers are taken down, if your applications are taken down, if things go on, you can't do work, right? So on the one hand, we're seeing it as like insufficient cybersecurity is a legitimate business problem. And then when it comes to actually building those, right, like having that cybersecurity program, that's a negative impact on business operations in and of itself, right? Because there's too many vendors to manage. The number of internal resources that you need to handle your security is crazy. The hackers are faster than vendors can keep up with. So,
and what are the hackers like? What's their goal? What are they trying to do? What are they what's they trying to get?
Yeah, so I mean, there's sort of three core things. We'll say four core things. They want your data so they can sell your data. That's what we see in like Change Healthcare. That's what we see in Access and all those, where medical records are really nice because they have your social security and they have privately PII.
So in the end, making money off of it.
Oh yeah, always making money off of it. There's a variety of ways you can make money off of it, but cybercrime is big business. So it's can I steal your data and can I sell your data? It's can I steal your IP and can I sell or use your IP to do something? You see that with nation states all the time. I think you guys may have seen in the news that Google AI researcher who turns out a Chinese spy who had been stealing data for years. It's the blackmail, right? Ransomware, extortion, things like that. Like I want to lock down. I don't need to steal your data. I just want to lock it down. Oftentimes we're seeing people double dipping on that though. So on the one hand, they're like, we're going to encrypt your data. And if you want access back to it, you have to pay us. And then they're turning around and they're selling that same data. So they get paid twice.
They're not honorable criminals.
Yeah. And then the last piece is destruction for the sake of destruction.
Right.
Which also oftentimes comes down to money. We see, and this is more large threat actor groups than small ones, but they'll play the stock market and they'll damage. It sounds like a lot of a Bond villain, but you short some shares and you destroy some stuff and you make some money.
Crazy.
Wow. I guess there's the other way of you just taking money from that company by having them wire money someplace. What you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and that's the final component is that you can get paid or you can trick them into paying you money, but
and then the business itself loses a whole bunch of money. Directly loses a whole bunch of money.
And it exists in two levels, right? There's the direct loss of money, but then there's the loss of trust, right? And that kind of goes back to the comment earlier about the number of small SMBs that go out of business within 6 months is you lose confidence, you lose faith, you don't want to engage anymore. So there's that upfront loss of money in everything from the paying them, the loss of the being tricked out of money, those processes. There's also the loss from if you're down for 2 weeks. What do you do if you're down for 2 weeks, right? You aren't processing deals, you aren't helping people, you aren't bringing money in. There's the legal fees. We see all these really big numbers thrown around when we look at breaches, right? Verizon says it's $3 million to a breach. Deloitte says it's, $1 million to a breach, things like that. But from a tangible standpoint, right? Like not a nebulous one, but from a tangible standpoint, cost you about $150,000 in lawyer fees anytime something happens. That isn't a generalized stat. That is a hard stat. So yeah, in aggregate, it all just keeps adding up.
So, what are some of the threats that now that, like, I know ransomware, where several years into that, and thankfully vendors like yourself have provided us with tools to protect ourselves from those sorts of things. And I'm imagining, like you were saying, AI is probably going to get a little crazy, especially us as MSPs, our clients, and all that stuff. But like, what are some of the things that you guys are seeing being on the front lines of all this stuff?
Yeah, so there's four that I'll kind of touch on here, and I'll give some specific examples. So first and foremost is ransomware, but ransomware is evolving. So I talked about ransomware as a service. Year over year, it's still up, and the reason why is ransomware is moving from something that only certain elite groups could have to be widely accessible to everybody. The advent of ransomware as a service and the ability for somebody to just go to a marketplace and just purchase it and begin deploying it and begin running it, deploy it in these easy, international cloud servers and things like that. It's not going away, and it's only getting scarier. It pairs with kind of two other things. One, what we jokingly say, cloud is king. 90% of attacks in 2023 happened against cloud or cloud infrastructure. There's a few reasons there. One, the COVID transformation really pushed people further towards cloud, whether that's SaaS productivity tools or whether it's true, cloud hosting like the big three providers. In both cases, what's known as the shared responsibility model becomes really interesting. A lot of people think, oh, it's in the cloud, that company's responsible for protecting that stuff. But that's not true, right? The idea behind the shared responsibility model is that if I am Amazon, I'm responsible for protecting the underlying infrastructure. But everything that is yours is actually your responsibility. So a lot of people stuck their stuff in there and they were like, oh, yeah, no, Amazon's got it. And they didn't secure it. They didn't harden it. They don't have cloud detection and response. They don't have components there. And all of a sudden It's getting just hammered. The second piece is, and I talked about this a bit earlier, cloud is kind of the keys to the kingdom for a few reasons. One, the advent of SSO, especially if we don't have MFA in place. So SSO is single sign-on. It's the idea of I have this set of credentials and I can use it anywhere. And it's a trusted set of credentials because somebody much bigger than me says it's trusted. So that could be your M365 credentials. That could be your sign-on with Google, your sign-on with Facebook, things like that. Well, if I can compromise your M365 account and I can get access to your credentials, not only do I have an email inbox now that I can stage things against, not only do I have SharePoint access where I can go looking for all of that private data, I can try and encrypt it, I can maybe load a malicious file, but I also have those credentials themselves. And now I can go to every other system that they're used to authenticate, and I can go cause chaos there as well. So cloud king, and that one actually segments into the other one, which is identity is trending. We in our talk alone see more than 10,000 brute force attempts per day against unique accounts. It'd be much higher if we expose to like certain things, but we're really looking for ones that like true compromise would matter. And we're seeing a whole new industry be born around identity threat detection response because it's so important, because the identity is the non-fungible thing. Regardless of whether you're in a physical premise, you're in a cloud, you're in a SaaS tool, etc., your user is the thing that travels across those things. So, by compromising that, you get around traditional EDR because it's not something that they're looking for. You can hide from a lot of security tools. You get access to so many more things, and ultimately, like, you can just be really, really damaging. So identity is trending up, and that's a critical part. And then the last piece, and you cannot talk about security right now without talking about it, is the AI piece. So I hinted a little bit earlier about how bad guys, threat actors, are using AI to make their lives easier and compromise, right? How they're using it for automation and analysis and all of those things. But you look at some of these techniques that are coming out, right? Vishing, which is video-based phishing, or it's voice-based phishing, but now it's expanding beyond that. It started with this trend, right, where you would get a call. Yeah, maybe you're a parent or a grandparent, maybe, you know, in New York, in New Jersey, here in DC, etc. You get a call from your grandchild. They sound scared. They're kind of panicked. They're doing something that establishes a clear timeline and a clear urgency. And they say, I'm in trouble. You know, I've been arrested. They're crying. I can't call my parents. The voice is slightly distorted, but it's pretty good. I desperately need you to wire me money for bail. Or I need you to Venmo one of my friends. Or I need you to do this or that, right? And the urgency behind it and the emotion behind it and the fact that it's tied to biometrics and actual voice led to people like falling for this. And you know, in a way that an email or a misspelled email just doesn't get across.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I know someone that it happened to like a few months ago. Same exact thing you were saying, like I need money for bail, but I don't know how.
And the voice sounded like who they expected it to
Yeah,
be?
they thought it was that. I don't remember exactly. Well, I know it's an older person that, like, you know, unfortunately fell for it. But yeah, he said it was like exactly the same voice, etc. And I guess you're so manipulated by the and pressured by the time sensitivity. Like, I need it now, and then like, you know, it's just go, but it's crazy. But I'm curious, like on the AI front, like what's your industry doing to combat that, especially from like a corporate side, not necessarily like, you know, an end user target or something like that, but like, what are you guys building into your stuff to stay ahead of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, you know, one example of AI going down that path, right? The more consumer path. What we're seeing on the corporate side is much less that. You are actually still seeing it. There was a great example at RSA or at Black Hat this past year of a video-based phishing where they faked like they were the guy's CFO and actually got on Teams with him. But
Live on Teams,
yeah, live. Yeah.
as having a conversation with a generated video.
Yeah.
That's
crazy. It was pretty good too. Luckily, that was done in a research setting, but crazy where it could go. That being said, what we're seeing on the corporate side is a lot less of those examples. Instead, what we're seeing is things like prompt injection. So prompt injection is the AI, these generative AI tools are programmed to not share certain points of information, right? But they are not perfect. And you can pose your prompts in such a way to poison the LLM and get it to do things for you. A great example of this was that the chat bot that got published at that one car site that shall not be named here. And it was not scrubbed, it was not protected, it was not any of these things. And somebody went in and used prompt injection to get it to give them a contract for a car for about $1,000 for about a $90,000 truck.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, that's a direct example impacting an SMB car business, but there's other cases of prompt injection, right? If people are using these LLMs for, let's say completely hypothetically here, you're working on mergers and acquisitions and you're doing due diligence on a company and you're using ChatGPT to say, hey, tell me all of these things about this company, this and that, and these things. And somebody else could do an injection to that and get it to return everything that you're researching, everything that you're looking into, your potential deal, your potential background. And as a bad guy, I could use that information to make bets, to manipulate you, to stage an email like I'm a part of the deal and convince you to wire me some money.
Right. And I think this goes back to Norman. I think we had on previous webinars discussed like on Copilot and stuff like that, where it keeps the stuff that you send into their private as opposed to like using ChatGPT publicly, right? Is that right,
Yeah,
Brandon?
exactly. So Copilot's got this section where it will look around on the web for stuff, and it also has a section where it's going to look at your work stuff. And when it's looking at your work stuff, all of that stuff is private. It's not going into ChatGPT's database or Copilot's database or any of that. It's your private stuff, and it stays private. So you can ask it stuff about, hey, how do I prepare for this meeting? And it'll look through your emails and it'll look through your
Right.
messages, and none of that becomes public information. It keeps it private.
Also, the public stuff in Edge, right? Like if you have the corporate versions, then it
Yeah,
keeps it
they call it
private.
enterprise chat. At least they used to call it enterprise chat, and it's right there in your Edge. I know I use Edge, so I'm looking at the icon right there. And yeah, you can click on it and start talking at any time. It's great.
So in terms of protecting from AI, obviously, like the most important one thing we love about your guys' product is the cloud tenant protection. I forget exactly what you call it, but like for the most part, I can't name a client that doesn't have either Microsoft 365 or Gmail or Google Workspace, excuse me, for their documents, their email. We've retired all of our on-premise stuff for the most part, especially email systems. But so there's the ransomware, right? So that to me, ransomware, I know it could affect multiple layers, but the clients that we've had that are maybe were antiquated, right? Like you have servers on premise and everything on computers locally. You have this whole ransomware component, which is my stuff is under my roof somewhere or in a data center or whatever. Then something bad happens. All of a sudden, they walk in the morning, nothing works. They can't ship. They can't do anything. They can't talk to customers. And then, depending on your backups and your recovery capabilities, that could take days or weeks to get back up and running. Which, like Brandon, like you said, could potentially put someone out of business, right? And we do know a lot of stories, and I think we all do. But like you were saying earlier, the whole business email compromise, which really is tenant compromise, right? Like once they're in, like you said, not only can they gain access to your email, your files, they can disguise themselves as being someone that they're not, like the CFO in your company or the CEO, and telling the controller, I need you to wire money to X, Y, and Z today or whatever. And clients are falling for it. But what do you do in the way of protecting these Google and Microsoft tenants? Because I know you do something interesting, and I almost feel like
So
other than moving everything to the cloud, it's like making sure you have someone watching your cloud, and I think that's kind of what you're doing. But maybe
yes, let's hear it. Now we know it's a scary world out there. What's Blackpoint Cyber doing to help out with?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeffrey, you talked to it there, right? We have what we call our cloud response solution, but cloud response is really looking at all of the characteristics of access and authorization for the cloud, as well as then what are the behaviors that are done inside of the tenant, to your point, once it is compromised. So, hey, a new safe forwarding rule is created. Hey, a new MFA is added. Hey, a new administrative user is added. We're looking at all those things going on. Emails are being deleted. Emails are being sent. Are they malicious? Do they have attached files? Is that attached file a ransomware file or a ransomware node, or all of these things? And then from the access and authorization standpoint, is this behavior the known behavior, or is it something bad? Are they using a VPN? Are they not? Are they logging in from a foreign country? Are they logging in from a data center, a residential proxy? What are the characteristics of it? Because, as the SOC is looking at these, right, and the SOC is our security operations center, they're the humans that are eyes on keyboard, right? The security professionals who are looking at all these things and saying, yes, malicious, known bad, really easy. Yes, that's okay, known good, really easy. A lot more of these things are maybes, right? They're questionables. And as they're looking at these questionables and they're like, oh, this person's logging in from, actually, I'll head off. Here's a real example. Over this summer, I was at a wedding in Poland. Poland. I have never logged in from Poland before. I logged in from Poland. I got a quick note and everything. I realized I wasn't on my VPN. I was on a personal laptop, not my work one. So I was like, I'm just going to use my commercial VPN, my NordVPN. Those two triggers had the SOC lock down my machine, lock me out. We're like, no, like this can't be right. We know Brandon, we know where he lives, we know what his behaviors look like. And on his other machine, he uses this type of VPN. On this one, he uses this one. And they were looking at all of those characteristics. In this case, it turned out it was an edge case. This is the best part about having people in there as well. They picked up the phone, they called me and was like, hey, nope, we're good. And we moved on. But also, the likelihood is very high that when you see those things together, that edge case, that maybe, that it is malicious, that I was sitting at, some coffee shop in Poland and somebody sniffed my information and took it over and was trying to take over my session. So
you see, I love that. I love that because it's beyond that. Their security is beyond the idea of, oh, the username and password and you can get in, but there's so much more going on a login. There's so much more information there. And anybody that's just looking at a username and password, really not getting all the information. I love that you guys are looking at so much more.
Yeah, security just thrives in context, right? Context is king. And all of that additional information that we can bring in is what helps us make those like informed decisions about, is this good or is this bad, right? In my past life, and I will save you guys a broader rant, but we used to talk about intent. The intent behind the action is so important because that's how we decide, is it malicious or is it benign? So knowing who somebody is, knowing what they do, knowing why they do it, all of it's critical in helping us make decisions about, yes, this is bad, and ultimately having that lovely protection rate that we have.
That's right. I love that. I love that you touched upon it before also, where you're not just looking at the login and everything around the login. You're looking at actions once they're logged in.
Yeah.
Are they sending out emails with this? They have attachments on them. I know you mentioned a whole bunch of stuff, and it's great because it's so effective. It caught one last week with one of our clients, and it was great. Like, it locked down the machine. They called us, so they locked down the machine. They called us and said, hey, we think something's going on over there. We were able to jump in and see what's happening with this person and this machine. It was great because they had just used the information they had gleaned over time about the way people act and the way people behave, and we're able to figure out, hey, this doesn't quite look kosher, which is amazing. It's not just username and password anymore. There's so much more, and these guys are looking at it, which is great.
And quick plug here, right? We defined all these things. We defined EDR and everything. We'll do a quick definition for what MDR is, right? Blackpoint is an MDR provider. That is managed detection and response. That is somebody that you trust to manage detection and response for you. If you are looking at an MDR provider, and you should be looking at MSP partners like we have over at RCS, and you should be looking at ourselves, they should be taking action on your behalf, right? If they're just sending you alerts and saying, hey, there's something bad, maybe you can go handle that yourself. Well, that's just creating more work for you.
No, I was going to touch on that as being maybe one of the most important things. Is, we've been doing IT managed services for, like I said, 25 years, and it would be a full-time job just looking at all these alerts and logs at scale and actually reacting to them. So not having something like this in place is just a non-starter for us, because we have so much of our time spent on building these systems and maintaining them and administrating them. I mean, to react to these alerts that are just getting, shot at us like machine guns all day long, it's impossible, right? So the fact that we could just outsource that for a small fee, per device or however you charge, and now we know that we don't need to pay attention to all those logs. You guys are managing it, the MDR, like you said, not just the EDR, and resolving things. And then if it's things beyond your control, you're giving us a call. Like Norman said, we just had a client the other day, and their machine was trying to get taken over, and immediately it was just like stopped in its tracks, and we were able to deal with it and get the user back on their merry way. So for sure, the managed component is huge, and it's not optional at this point for us.
So, little known piece of information, when we first saw an EDR, so we saw, EDR, great, it's going to collect all kinds of information from the clients, and we're going to be able to look at the log. I think we were like 2 weeks into looking at the log, you're like, this is insane. There's no way this can be done. There's no way this can be done by humans. It needs a whole bunch of humans. It needs rules written to what to bubble up. And so, yeah, what do you guys have as far as like how it's looking through? How does it know what to bubble up to a human, and then what happens?
Magic. No. So it's we have our detection engine, right? Our detection engine is really looking for all of these critical behaviors, these indications of compromise, these components, right? And we are using AI, but we are not looking to replace our humans with AI. We are using it upstream to link these various things together and say, hey, we saw this and this and this and this, and together they are greater than the sum of their parts, right? Maybe each one is fairly low risk on their own. But when you look at them together, they paint you a picture of a very subtle attack that has moved across the attack chain, and that ultimately is driving towards compromise. And that engine, right, that upstream analysis ultimately surfaces those critical alerts to our security analysts. And as I said before, right, it's basically the gray. Right, if it's red, it's an automatic action. If it's green, it's we're good on it, but maybe come back to it later. But if it's a gray, it surfaces up to a human, and they're going to look at all those critical metadata points that help them make a decision. Also, when we're doing it, we're doing enrichment, and we're pulling in new information, and we're saying that from location to device characteristics to softwares that are running, do you have an EDR in place? Do you not? What are your compensating controls look like? But then that last step is that eyes on it, making an informed decision. To your point earlier, like our SOC guys are awesome. Like they are some of the best, and they can make that decision. They can say like, I've been looking at these behaviors for months, and this is not what Norman does. This is a weird thing, and we need to act. We need to, quarantine, and we need to call him, and we need to make sure he's okay, and then we need to help him fix it. So, there's so much data that goes into it. There's identity data, there's device data, there's behavioral data, there's anomalies, there's heuristics, there's all the lovely AI models and all these things. But at the end of the day, it's also like boots on the ground security professionals who are able to make those hard decisions.
Yeah.
And you guys can lock down a machine, can lock down an account, like what?
Yeah. So it can be an account lockdown, can be a machine lockdown, can be a session reset. So really common attack techniques that we are seeing in the cloud right now is rather than compromising the credentials, because MFA gets in the way of that, they try and do what's called hijacking the session. So they sit in between and they steal your session token because you've already authenticated with your credentials and you've already done your MFA and everything. And then they can just piggyback it in and they can act like they're you and they can do everything inside. Well, not on our watch. We're just going to reset the session, right? Sure, it requires you needing to relog in, but they would have to do everything to intercept, and typically at that point we're shutting it down and we're not allowing them to get in.
Okay, so you guys can, when I say lock down a machine, I mean you can isolate that machine so whoever's on that machine can't jump to another machine, can't get to that machine, all of that. And then I guess you can do that. What can you do with it, like my Microsoft account?
Yeah, so I mean that was a great example of what I was talking about there. We can force a sign out. We can lock an account out. We can do that session reset and all those things. It's I joke. It's everything from a big hammer, like let's just hit it with a hammer, to a really fine scalpel. Let's be really subtle and get down to the very specific action or behavior that's being taken.
So when we install Blackpoint, we put an agent on the machines, agent on the workstations, and we connect it with their Microsoft tenant. So what are you guys watching?
Everything.
You're watching the whole Microsoft tenant, I imagine. You're watching everyone's logins and what's going on in that tenant, emails coming in, going out, that sort of thing.
There's a lot of secret sauce in there, so I can't give you too much insight. But really, it's all of the access, all the authorizations, all the administrator behaviors, who's touching it, where they're touching it, how they're touching it.
And on the endpoint, you're watching what's happening on the endpoint, I guess, what's running, what's not running. Are you watching other things on the network?
We are. So what's interesting, and if you've had the chance to be into the portal before, log into Snap, we actually do expose our SOC portal so that partners and customers can see it. And you'll notice there's this one view in there called the network map. The network map is very cool because it shows you everything that is on your network, not only the things that are running a Blackpoint agent. Because we passively map the entire thing. Because it's really important, we know, like, sure, the things that are running the agent might be the ones that we're protecting, but we want to know what's interacting with those. How are they interacting with it? Did somebody, here's like a thing that happened. Did somebody walk in to the building? Are they war driving outside? Are they following somebody in, et cetera? They got on the network and they're doing something. Well, now we can see this network, this laptop, maybe a phone, interacting with devices on the network. It's not running an agent. We don't know characteristics. It shouldn't be there, but we can see it in our map and we can start to monitor it and go, oh, that's suspicious. Who's that talking to? How are they talking to it? Should we not allow it to communicate with things anymore, et cetera?
That's awesome. So we're not monitoring the physical also. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned before the idea of SSO, single sign-on, the idea of being able to use your Microsoft account to log on to, say, I don't know, your ERP system or
mm-hmm.
whatever other, your Dropbox account or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it as kind of this, if they get onto that, they get the keys to the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm starting to think that it's also the other way around. Whereas if I've got Blackpoint protecting my Microsoft account, I have got so much better security on all the things I use my Microsoft account to log into.
This is true. This is true, right? Making sure, because hey, look, if they compromise it, there's a good chance that they are going to do something against M365. So there's a good chance that you're gonna catch that there was something wrong with that account. Yeah.
Well, this was great. If anyone has any questions or want to come on the live stream, just click the link that Alex put in the chat. And yeah, I think this was great. Anything else we want to touch on or that we missed?
No, I think that we touched on a bunch there, but this was fun, guys.
All right, great. I'm glad we got to do this.
Anyone has any questions?
Blackpoint's one of these products that I've talked about cybersecurity with our clients for years, blue in the face. Blackpoint's one of those where people are into it. Like, they say yes to this one because they see the value immediately, and it's on this protection side. It's been doing such great work for us. Like, it's catching things. It's unbelievable how well it's doing as far as being able to be a great security product.
Yeah, it's crazy how much is actually happening when you start to really look at it, right?
It's comforting now. I'll tell you what, Jeff, it's comforting now that, like, we always did preventative stuff, and I always had this like mild sweat of, I wouldn't know if someone had already breached something. But now it's like, okay, great. You sort of complete the stack of, now I know if something has gotten through, and you can guard against that also. It's not like, oh, something got through, nothing we can do now.
Right.
But we've got that. It's been such a great thing to be able to round out our security stack.
100%. Well, thanks a lot, Brandon and Norman. Keep a lookout for us on social, our website, upcoming events. We're going to be talking about Google Gemini. Speaking of AI, so that's the AI product that Google integrates into their workspace. I'm sure Brandon's going to make sure we're protecting those things and his team in terms of what's coming out in the future. That's November 19th at 2 p.m. December 10th.
Everybody's got an AI to do something, and Google's is a pretty damn good one.
Yes, December 10th for the fish lovers out there. We have our fish and business themes, December 10th at 2 p.m. Looking forward to the New Year's run. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Norman. Like to have a little fun sometimes, not just geeky stuff. So this was great, Brandon. Thanks so much. If anyone has any questions or want to set up a time to speak to Blackpoint or Brandon to learn more about it, secure.
What about the happy hour networking? Do we mention that? The Atlanta one?
Yeah, go for it.
Second Thursday of every month, we've got an in-person happy hour that happens, and all kinds of people come down, have drinks, meet people, and see how everybody else can help the business.
Yeah, so go to our website under events and you're registered, please. So yeah, thanks so much, Brandon. Thanks, Norman.
Laura, yes, exactly. I was commenting on Laura's comment on the on the chat here. Yeah, whew, peace of mind. Peace of mind's a hard thing to come by in an MSP, but yes, Blackpoint definitely helps out with that for
We
sure.
do love it. We are fans.
All right.
Thanks so much. Thanks a
All right.
lot.
Thanks, Brandon.
Cheers.
Take
All.
care.
Bye-bye.